Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Thursday, April 17th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 524 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all of those tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. Today officially marks 1 week away from the 2025 NFL Draft. We will, of course, have more draft coverage in the coming days, along with draft coverage after all 3 days. Cannot wait. And we will get answers for each of these draft picks that the New York Jets hold here very, very soon. But today, Aaron Rodgers made some comments on the Pat McAfee show, taking one more final shot at the New York Jets that I want to dive into, and we'll get into it here right away. I have a 2-minute clip that I want to play of the Rodgers Jets statements that he made today on the McAfee show. So I'll play the clip and then we'll react to what Rodgers had to say afterwards. Here was Rodgers earlier today on the Pat McAfee show.
You meet with the coach.
We start talking. He runs out of the room. I'm like, that's kind of strange. I was like, then he comes back with the GM. And I'm like, all right. So we sit down in the office. And I think we're going to have this long conversation. I've flown across the country. And 20 seconds in, he goes, literally, I'm talking to the GM about something, and he leans to the edge of his seat and goes, so do you want to play football? And I was like, yeah, I'm interested. And he said, we're going a different direction at quarterback. And I said, and I was kind of shocked. Now, not shocked because I didn't think that was a possibility. Listen, of course, they want to move on. That's totally fine. But shocked because I just flew across country. You could have told me this on the phone. If we weren't even going to have a conversation, and this is verbatim exactly how it happened. So I said, huh? And he goes, we just want to know how you want it released, the messaging. And I said, verbatim, I don't give a shit about the message. And I said, why? And then he said, I don't want to be up in front of the room saying something and have guys looking back at you.
Interesting.
And I said, what does that even mean? Are you assuming that I would be in the back of the room during a team meeting undermining what you're saying? I said, you don't know me. And he said, you don't know me. And then I said, exactly, which is why I flew across the country to have a face-to-face meeting with you to talk about my experience with the Jets and to hear your vision for the team. 20 seconds in. What I thought was going to be a couple-hour meeting turned into like a 15-minute meeting, and I walked out of there. But
so at that moment,
that was a strange meeting for sure. There was no me pleading like, please have me on the team. No.
I don't know.
I don't want any part of that. It was already a debacle.
So that was Rodgers on McAfee today. That was the main meat and potatoes there of what he had to say. I will just say this. I am so glad that we are now over after this clip, today's interview of having to listen to Rodgers on McAfee and hearing what he had to say and all the stuff that he says in headlines. I'm so over that. I'm glad it's over. It feels very freeing if you're a New York Jet fan to not have Rodgers now on McAfee every single week. And of course, today really kind of being the last shot that he takes at the Jets here on his way out. A couple things I just want to say. Number one, before we actually get into interview content, he said that, oh, I flew across country on my own dime. Like, this guy doesn't have millions of dollars. Please. You can fly across country all you want, dude. This notion of, oh, poor me, look at me, woe is me, I flew across country on my own dime. Come on, man. You're getting paid millions. You've been in the NFL forever. Give me a break with that nonsense. Like, oh, I've spent all this money flying across country. Give me a break. All right. I will also throw this out there. And this is one of the quotes from the interview I want to break down. Talked about how he felt disrespected. And that just, to me, I feel like was one of the bigger things I wanted to discuss. Disrespected. Dude, everything that the Jets have done the last 2 years has been catered to you. They brought in Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard, Nathaniel Hackett, Billy Turner. Heck, they even brought in Devontae Adams last year when the season was pretty much over at 2-4. It was Rodgers and all of his buddies. He was running the show. He was running the offense, force-feeding the ball to Devontae, throwing the ball a ton down the stretch last season so he could get his 500th touchdown. That was it. It was every weekend, every Sunday, it basically turned into Aaron Rodgers doing whatever the heck Aaron Rodgers wanted to do. That's what it was. And you feel disrespected? They catered to everything that you wanted the last 2 years. You won 5 games last year, 5-12, and you feel disrespected. That just makes no sense. That is just an absolute clown show of an answer, in my opinion, from Rodgers. I would also throw this out there. When the Jets asked him, are you interested in playing? Do you plan on playing? And he said, yeah, I'm interested. That's not a yes or no answer. And you come to find out more today in this interview, he still doesn't know what the heck he wants to do. Now, if I had to predict, I do think he ends up with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But the Jets, another reason why moving on from Rodgers right now seems like the right move is you couldn't have this completely drag on this entire offseason. You couldn't be sitting here a week before the draft, still have no clue what Rodgers is going to do. It failed, move on. It was a disaster. It flipped the page. It's a new regime. It's a new era. Put it behind you. And that's what Glenn and Muji did. And it was the right thing to do. Yes, they got to win. I get all that. They've got to prove it by winning. Totally understand. But you couldn't have this drag on all offseason. You needed to figure it out. You wanted to move on from Rodgers, you move on, and that's it. I'm interested in playing is not a yes or no answer. And just the whole idea of letting your franchise go all in again to try and win, like to probably at best be a 9-8 team next year with Rodgers, to center your team, your core quarterback, where he's going to show offense, just make any sense. And Glenn and Muji made that clear here, where they told him, look, we're moving on. And I will also say this, right? Rodgers talked about, right, oh, they could have just called me up on the phone or done a FaceTime call, whatever. You know Rodgers and the type of person he is. If the Jets didn't have him fly out there and visit, you know for a fact that he would have said, oh, they could have had me at least fly out there. If the Jets would have called him up, right? He said, oh, they could have just called me. If the Jets would have called him up and said, oh, we're moving on, you know Rodgers would have came on here and said, oh, well, the Jets could have at least shown some respect and had me at the facility and had me in person. And now they had him in person. It's like, oh, you could have just called me up. You know that's the way Rodgers would have took it, because that's just the type of person he is. And that's just where he's at after this whole 2-year debacle ended. And another thing, too, Rodgers at the end there. Oh, it was already a debacle. basically deflecting the blame. Like, okay, yeah, there was a lot of issues. You weren't the main issue, certainly, right? There was a lot of problems. You were not the only problem, but you certainly weren't a solution. So at the end there, too, him kind of deflecting the blame and saying, oh, it was already a debacle, like everything went wrong around him, but Rodgers was perfect. Yeah, no, that wasn't the case. Yes, there was a lot of wrong around you, but you certainly weren't a solution. So, look, this regime, they didn't want him back. They told him straight up, we're moving on. We're getting rid of you. And it's a new page. It's a new slate. It's a clean slate. You move on. And I'm just, like I said, I'm glad that this is it. We're done talking about Rodgers. Done talking about Rodgers on McAfee. This was his last chance to try and take one more stab, one more shot at the Jets here on his way out and make the Jets look bad. He didn't even address Glenn or Muji by name, which I think shows you how he feels about them. It is what it is. You move on. It's a new day. And the Rodgers era will not be remembered fondly at all over the last 2 years. So that's my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Just wanted to come in here, give you a couple of my thoughts. Didn't want to spend a ton of time on this. You know, he's not our quarterback. That's been known for months now. But him coming out, talking about this, wanted to discuss it, wanted to give some of my takeaways. And yeah, that's where we stand. Rodgers still not as have a team. Could retire, could play for another team. Rodgers today at points when he wasn't talking about the Jets, he said a lot by not saying, or saying he says a lot while not saying a lot, right? He talks a lot, but then you kind of take away some very little takeaways. Didn't have much to say about his future. Could retire, could play. So who knows? I still think he'll end up playing for the Steelers, which could make for an electric Monday night home opener for the Jets. We'll see. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What are your thoughts on the Aaron Rodgers comments? Your thoughts on Glenn and Muji and the approach they took? And yeah, let me know. We'll be back with a lot more content coming your way. Until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.